I'm not aware of any apologies for absence.
Councillor Bruce hasn't arrived as yet, Chair.
Okay, you'll just have to join when he gets here, if he does. I wonder, Liz, if maybe possibly someone can give him a ring just to make sure.
I'll do that just now, Bill. I'll just disappear off camera for a moment.
Okay. Was there any declarations of interest? Okay.
My apologies, yes, Chair. The regular declaration of interest as a council house tenant, but obviously I shall be able to attend the discussion.
Okay, that's great, thanks. Any further declarations? No. Okay, we move straight away to item 3. And I'm sure he needs no introduction, but I'll introduce him anyway. Kenny Rogers, who is he's in the top right-hand corner of my screen, but maybe not in yours. So I'll just pass straight to you, Kenny, and maybe you can introduce your colleague.
Yep. Thanks very much for inviting us along today. It's much appreciated. Just a brief update, Chair, if it's okay with you, from the last time I attended, which was at the Warden meeting, and we were still awaiting the outcome of when the new hospital would actually be completed, and I think I'd said it was 6 weeks behind. Just to confirm that we've now got an agreement with Balfour Beatty and Scottish Government that the completion date will be delayed by 12 weeks, and that's contractually confirmed. So 31st of May 2021 will be the handover date, and we'll have a programme of moving in the occupants thereafter, which we're currently working on. So just really to just give you that latest position, as it were. So moving on, you'd invited us along today to do a virtual walkthrough tour of the new hospital. Obviously with COVID, there are no on-site tours currently, but those of you that are in the Strath a lot obviously know that there's been a lot of construction going on, and watching everybody keep on going throughout the COVID period, which has been absolutely fantastic. So I invited Gordon along today to basically talk us through his virtual tour, which has been put together for us, which is really quite interesting. So if I can introduce Gordon. Gordon is my clinical advisor on the Badenoch and Strathspey project, and what that means is Gordon's the critical link between the architects, the contractors and the frontline clinicians, which is a really, really important role, because if we want our hospital designed and built that are functional for clinical people to work in, we need somebody that's got that level of attention to detail, that knows where things should go, what the standards are, things like what blinds we should have, what the toilet should look like, all of those little things, where the plug sockets are. So Gordon is our crucial link, and he's a bit of an unsung hero for me. You won't like me saying that, but we couldn't do it without Gordon. So Gordon, could I hand over to you, please, just to maybe start the tour, or if you want to give a wee preamble.
Yes, that's grand. Thank you very much for that, Kenny. Not feeling at all under any pressure there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sharing my screen. So I'm going to share my desktop. So I've just put together a very brief PowerPoint presentation, which then will lead us into the walkthroughs. So I'm just going to ask regularly throughout the presentation if everybody can see my screen. So do just say if you can't see my screen or if anything goes awry, and then I'll lead us into the walkthroughs. So what I'll start with is the new hospital PowerPoint, and I'm hoping that you can all see this.
I think we can, yeah.
Grand, thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to put the walkthrough into context. So we've got a front elevation here of the new hospital, which is Kenny's discussed around opening times, etc. So we've got the front elevation here on approach. We've got a GP wing and offices to the upper level, main entrance here, and an outpatient wing on the side here. On to the next slide, just to give it some context, we've got a site plan on the left-hand side of the screen. So this is the actual building here, represented in white, and you've got a green roof here, hence the change in colour. So You're approaching from the main road here, turning into the site and travelling down into the main car park, and you'll see that front elevation here. This branch off to this side of the building is more to the service areas and UCC. And this drawing on the right hand side shows you the main layout internally. So you've got your main ward here to the rear of the building, outpatient department here, main entrance here, GP wing in green, UCC and some service areas here and further service areas to the back. You've got your main railway line here and steam railway to this side here. So it's quite a narrow site, but it actually sits quite nicely within the site. So this is really just to give you some context of what's happening on site, because with COVID, people can't get down to the site at the moment. So to the left are the two computer drawings supplied by the architects of the main waiting area and reception. So the drawing above on the left is looking down into the main reception area with the large roof light above, and the drawing below shows you the back of the waiting area looking towards the main door. And the picture on the right hand side of the screen there is the actual fitted roof light as of 2 weeks ago, obviously still to be framed out. And externally, this is the GP wing on the ground floor with the office above. And it's just to give you an idea of the external rendering and how that's coming along. The studded area on the left is the main elevation of the outpatient department awaiting the final finish. And then the next slide shows you the rear of that outpatient department with the therapy garden and the glazed walkway. The next drawing, the drawing on the left shows you the main inpatient corridor and touchdown base with a representation of one of the internal courtyards on the ward. And obviously the picture shows you the progress that's been made on that, and they're actually further on with that. That one was taken on the 28th of October. And again, this is in the inpatient ward. This is one of your touchdown bases. So the picture on the left is a representation, and the picture on the right is showing you what's actually as built as of 2 weeks ago. So it's moving at pace. It's actually making really good progress. Okay. So I'm going to change this now over to the actual walkthrough. So we've got 8 routes, they're all denoted in colour, and the first route is the black route. So that route should take us in through the main door. Hopefully this is all playing okay on your screens. Okay, in through the main door and headed towards the main reception, and we'll be turning right into the main consulting area. Headed down into the GP corridor, and that's a small sub-wait for the GP wing. And down into the corridor here, you'll notice that everything looks very plain. There is obviously going to be colour on the walls and doors. Headed into a GP consult room, and this would be your typical GP consult room. Then coming back out through into the main corridor, down to the bottom of the corridor and headed towards minor ops. So this will be your minor ops room. And these are actually really representative of how it's going to look, other than everything's shown largely in white. Just before I move on to the next one, is everybody seeing that okay?
Yeah, I think we are.
Grand.
Yes,
okay.
thank you.
Okay, we're headed on to the dark blue route now, which is kitchens and deliveries and kitchens. Yep, wee glitch, sorry. In through the back entrance here, which is where stores will be delivered predominantly. There's various areas, and it's your kind of back of house services really. Headed down the corridor towards the kitchen. This one's a little duller than the others because the kitchen is a subcontractor fit out, so you're just seeing the empty room, unfitted at the moment. Okay, and then we're headed on to the external route, which takes us towards the front door, and then we do a U-turn and we'll swing round. So headed up to the front door, ground floor GP area, upper floor is the open office. Nice big corner window on the open office, and this is towards the front elevation now. So you're headed round towards the service side of the building, which is adjacent to the main railway line. So on the lower floor there, you've got the GP windows, upper floor is offices. You'll notice the 3 long windows, full-length windows in the darker render there, your UCC, your unscheduled care rooms, and unscheduled care ambulance entrance through the double doors, all canopied for the GP's entry and exit as well for the out-of-hours usage. The white door there takes you in through a staff entrance to the upper level. Swinging around to the back of the building, so this is the service entrance that we went in earlier towards the kitchen. And then you're swinging round towards the ward. So this is the side of the main ward. You'll notice the depth of the windows. The windows have been designed to maximise the views and light for the patient day room with access onto an enclosed therapy garden. And 2 of the inpatient bedrooms on either side have direct access to the outside, but the rest of them don't, as you can see here. Headed round to the very end of the site, fire exits. So we're now coming round to the steam railway side of the building. And again, there's some nice walkways and views out from the inpatient rooms. And as we head up, there's another courtyard area coming off the main ward, giving access onto the gardens. And on the inside of that, that's it here. It does look a bit better than that in reality. And there's internal seating on either side of the doors. Coming up through the pathways on the outside of the building, you're headed towards the therapy garden, and it's almost a kind of enclosed courtyard, so it should have a really nice feel about it, and that's directly accessible from some of the meeting rooms in the outpatient wing. The main waiting area also has direct access there as well, and that's you looking in towards the X-ray area. So we're at the back of the outpatient wing just now. Some of the soft clinic rooms we're panning down by the side of. And up towards the outpatient physio gym windows. And then turn back to the front of the building. So these are all your outpatient rooms, and that's the dental room with the longer narrow window, and back up to the front door. Okay, we're just heading on to the green route, and the green route should take us down to the, I think it's the inpatient room, so back in again through the front door, and back in past main reception, again through the main reception area, and just coming down, so that door there, dead ahead, takes you straight down to the ward and in past X-ray. So as you come down the corridor, we've got a built-in seating area there to the right, a man waiting for X-ray, doesn't have a mask on. It's all obviously done in a pre-COVID world. And then as you come to the bottom of the corridor here, you turn left. Again, the glazing I think is really nice in this facility. Charge nurse's office to the left and through the double doors to the ward. Main reception there to the ward, it's all integrated and past one of the internal courtyards, which are a lovely feature which will be accessible to the patients as well. And there's 2 of those in the inpatient ward, and we should be swinging round into, I think it'll be a prep room just after this touchdown base. Yeah, into the prep room here. And then once we come out of the prep room, we should be headed back out into the corridor and into one of the inpatient rooms. Again, large glazed areas so that you can see out and into an ensuite. And just to be clear, the model there shows glazed doors to the ensuite, and there won't be glazed doors in the ensuite. The model can be a wee bit glitchy, but it is really good given the restrictions that we have. So we're coming in through the staff entrance at the service side of the building and in and up the stairs. The upper floor of the building is non-patient, non-public. So you've got your integrated office, changing room, staff, kitchen and dining, Scottish Ambulance Service office. So as you come up the stairs, we'll be turning left. And into the corridor. And on the left here, you've got some offices. That darker door is actually the lift to the upper floor. And then the door on our right-hand side takes us into the staff kitchen and dining. And onwards to external terrace for the staff area, which is quite a large external terrace, which actually has some lovely views. It doesn't pan all the way back, but you do get some really outstanding views from that position. There's a corridor door as well onto the terrace, which takes you back down to the large integrated office. Now, the integrated office was obviously done pre-COVID in its design, so there will be some amendments on that as things progress. But it is a really nice open area, plenty of glazing, plenty of light, different sizes of glazed elements. That's a large corner window facing out the front. And the coloured renderings that we've received are really quite outstanding. So we're nearly there. You don't have to listen to me too much longer. The maroon route takes us into the UCC, the Unscheduled Care Department. So this would be your main ambulance entrance. And into the left, and you've got 3 UCC rooms and a UCC prep area on the right. So this is a typical UCC room. Obviously, it's not showing you any of the window treatments because there are various areas which will have the windows obscured. So the purple route takes us into the outpatient department, which we haven't really been into before. So again, in past main reception, but we're turning round to the left. You'll notice there's vending there on the left with a half wall in front of it. So straight through this door, this is your main outpatient department. To the left, straight ahead of you will be the dental department, but we'll be turning down that corridor and headed into one of the outpatient clinic rooms, of which there's 3, and these will be compatible to near me as well. So this is a typical outpatient clinic room. And then we'll come out of this room back into the corridor and into the physio gym. And this is the outpatient physio gym as well. Okay, and the final route is the teal route, which should take us through to the ward and the ward day room. So again, in through the front door and into main reception and down, slightly different route, down towards the door on the left. We've got lovely views out from that area, and in the summer these doors could be opened and down the corridor, again past X-ray. And down to the bottom of the corridor and turning left. And then into the ward through the double doors and past the courtyards, which I showed you earlier, and onwards to the, I think it'll be an inpatient room and then the day room. Yeah, so this is one of the inpatient rooms that looks out towards the steam railway side of the building. Quite a quick turn there. A lot of work has gone into the layouts. Oh, we staggered into the wall, sorry. Into the layouts on the patient bedrooms. And this is a day room, which has an integrated assessment kitchen with bifold to seal it off if necessary, but some lovely views and access to an enclosed and safe courtyard for our patients. And that's the end of the walkthrough. Is there anything that you would like to ask me?
Gordon, thank you. That was fantastic. Really, really interesting, and really something we needed to see. Muriel.
Thank you, Gordon, and getting the vision like that is fantastic. A few questions for you. The X-ray room, has that been adjusted so that it can take bariatric beds? That's one question. And the next two questions really relate to Kenny, probably. One of the rooms, the consulting rooms, looked as if it had a light box on it, but I presume that will be a PACS or RIS screen. And has the digital connectivity for PACS and RIS all been sorted out? And I'm delighted to see that the physio gym there, and I just hope that by next May that we can get the physio staff in place. Thank you.
I can answer on bariatric access. The X-ray department is fully accessible, and our HFS teams are also doing a lot of measuring and circulation space adjustments with anything that's being purchased for the new build. Regarding the light box that you saw on the wall in the clinic rooms, they're a representation, and they're not an accurate representation of a Snellen chart. So sorry, that's a wee bit glitchy on that one. There are PACS and RIS screens, however, that's been considered around the e-health remit that's currently going on to ensure that we have full accessibility in order to view x-rays, etc. And Kenny, do I hand over to you on the other questions if you could advise?
So can you remind me what that question was again, Muriel?
You're on mute, Muriel.
I'm going to get a T-shirt saying not on mute. I do apologise. It was the connectivity to take the PACS and RIS technology. I presume that's all being put in place and sorted. And the other one was the physio staffing levels, Kenny.
Yeah, so the connectivity, it will be a standard NHS N3 line that's going in with all the appropriate infrastructure that goes with it. So yes, there'll be full access for all IT and Wi-Fi throughout the building as well. In terms of physio staffing, I'm not totally connected at the moment to the post-COVID restart arrangements. So the musculoskeletal physios are doing an awful lot of telephone work at the moment, near me work. And I think that'll continue for some period of time. I think it will be interesting to see where we'll actually go into the future as to how much on-site work is done versus telephone or near me work, which I think we welcome in the Badenoch and Strathspey Hospital because our services were designed around that. So I think that will be good. But what would you like to see, Muriel?
But I think I just think the facility is great because when you see that you've got the occupational therapy kitchen and the access unit, it would be a shame that any system falls down because of you don't have the physio. I think it's the whole package to ensure that everything can be dealt with at a local in the new hospital level. I fully understand that the NUME is working well and the uptake has been fantastic, but we still need to make sure that we can deliver for those patients and clients that need that wee bit extra to move them safely home.
I think some of you will need to remember is that there are those of us amongst us who actually have no idea what you're talking about.
Sorry.
Is your hand still up for a reason?
Sorry, I didn't. There we go.
Any other questions for Kenny?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And we can see you.
Bill, I'm sorry I was late. The ward sizes, how big are the wards going to be?
Gordon, I think I'll let you take that one because you've got the detail on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, in terms of actual room sizes, We're looking at 16.5 square metres up to about 21.5, 22 on some of the bigger rooms. They're all single ensuite rooms, however. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's excellent. Thank you. I've
John?
got another. Can I ask another question, Bill?
Yeah, indeed. Try and use the hand facility if you want to ask a question.
Sorry, this wasn't working. It is now. Right. This is the main railway line that the hospital's close to, as well as the steam railway. Is that correct?
Yes, the inpatient ward sits between the two.
And will the vibration from the main line railway ever cause problems to the equipment being used in the hospital?
There's been acoustic modelling done, and there's certainly enough separation to indicate that that should not be an issue, and that has been evaluated throughout the process. Kenny, do you have anything to add to that?
No, other than, the design clearly has taken into account the two railways. We actually welcome the railway lines there because it brings meaningful activity, sound, visual to people that are in hospital. They don't entirely want peace and quiet. They want to see a working world around them. So we're perfectly happy with that. And the windows are designed and the walls are designed around managing the sound that comes. They'll both sound very different.
Yeah. And finally, will there be a coffee room for the public? Or it was discussed some time ago and it's thought not. Has there been a change of mind?
So there'll be a vending facility on site in the waiting area that will provide hot and cold drinks and I think healthy snacks. Is that right, Gordon?
Yes, it is. We don't have the detail, but that's certainly the remit that we're waiting to come in.
Oh, that's fine. Good. Okay, thanks very much, everyone.
And if the worst comes to the worst, John, you can always walk down to the end of the industrial estate and buy a burger and chips.
That's why I'll be in the hospital in the first place.
Pippa. Pippa, over to you.
Thanks. Hi, thank you, Kenny and Gordon. It was less of a question and more of an observation. When I first started and the hospital was just a mooting at that time, there was a lot of public outcries, I'm sure you remember. And one of the ladies who's had the pleasure of working in our local hospital, St. Vincent's, for a huge number of years, had said to me that she didn't much care for all of the outcry because in her mind it wasn't the building that made the hospital, it was the people. And for the first time, although we haven't actually been able to see, obviously we've all been on site, we've seen what a beautiful area it's in, to see the walkthrough and to put it into perspective, I think it's going to be an amazing place for the amazing people that currently provide our service for the NHS to be able to translocate to. And I just wanted to say thank you for bringing it because it really brought it to life, certainly for me, and I hope for the other people watching. Thank you.
And if I could just add to that, it's interesting you say that, Pippa, because the majority of staff working in our existing community hospitals want to go and work in the new hospital. So it could have been a decision point for a lot of people to either retire or leave. Actually, they want to go, and we're working with our Human Resources Department to facilitate that changeover and support them in what will be a very, very different move. It will be like moving into the Starship Enterprise from what they're currently in. So we've got a strong and robust training and development programme for the staff. So what I'm picking up is they're really looking forward to the move.
That's very good to hear. Thank you.
Kenny and Gordon, really just thank you very much for bringing this to us today. It's really been of great interest, and I think we're all looking forward to the opening day. Not necessarily to use the facilities, which we hope we won't be using, but I think it's been absolutely fantastic. We've been talking about this facility for years and years and years, and actually to see it coming out of the ground on a day-to-day basis has been brilliant to see it. And certainly when it's opened, we hope that by that time it will be COVID secure and maybe we'll get a tour of the building at the right time. So I really thank you both for doing this today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill. And I feel like a proud father bringing this today, because our elected members, past and present, have been hugely important to us in developing this community hospital and its wider services. So yeah, we're really chuffed to bring it to you today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, by the way, you're
Bye-bye
more
now.
than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you want. If maybe you've got insomnia, or I'm sure
Well,
we can help with
got
that.
the Badenoch and Strathspey Therapy Gardens group at 5:30, so we'll go and prepare for that, I think, which will be fine.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Thank you for
Bye.
coming.
Thank you very much. Take care all.
Cheers. Members, item 4 is the presentation by Grant Moyer and David Klein of the CNPA about the Heritage Horizons bid. Excuse me. Grant, David, I don't actually see Grant and David.
Chair, I've just had a message from Grant that he's joining just now, so if we can just bear with him, he's just joining as we speak.
Okay. John, while we're waiting, how's your missus? You're on mute.
Absolutely fine. I must say that the paramedics from Grantown were absolutely fantastic. I'm now the one on crutches, so off to the physio on Friday.
Okay.
Chair, just advise that's Grant joining the meeting now.
Hello.
Hey, Grant.
How are you doing?
In your own time, whenever you feel like it, just carry on.
Good stuff. Morning, everyone. So I'll speak for a couple of minutes and then I'll put up a few slides. I've got a few slides to put up, but just say thanks very much. And I'll just give you a quick presentation on the Heritage Horizons bid that we're putting in, and then happy to take any questions from any of you. So just to give a little bit of background, which is that the Park Authority put in an expression of interest about a year and a half ago now, roughly speaking. We were one of 128 different expressions of interest from around the UK, and we got through that, and we were invited last December down to London to pitch to the National Lottery on our project, which we did, and we got through that, and then we were one of 12 to then be invited now to put in a final bid, which has to go in by the 26th of February 2021, so next February. The Heritage Horizons is the National Lottery's new big flagship proposal. It's for big projects, much bigger than any previous ones, and they're looking for things that are transformational, that are collaborative and are innovative. So I'll come on and say a bit about that. Our project also needs to fit with what they're looking to do, and the one that we're looking at is around landscape and nature, as you can imagine, in terms of where we are. So what we're looking at is a project that really focuses on the net zero targets and how we can achieve those within the Cairngorms and the 2030 sort of thing. So I'll take you through what we're looking at and what we're proposing, and I'll tell you a bit about who's all involved, and then, as I said, happy to take any questions. So hopefully this will work beautifully when I do this. It did yesterday, so here's hoping it does again. If I do that, can you see a presentation?
Yes, we can.
Excellent, good. Right, so that's, I will just put on the next slide. So this is really trying to sum it all up in one easy slide in terms of the things that we're looking at. But down the left-hand side is collaborative, innovative and transformational. So that's what it has to be, because that's what the National Lottery Heritage Fund are looking for. And really it's about trying to make sure that this is something that's, I suppose, as I said, a bit bigger and a bit wider than what they currently fund in terms of, you'll know about these things like the Landscape Partnership at Tomintoul and Glenlivet, or like the Badenoch Great Place scheme. They're lottery funded, but they're relatively small schemes in the sort of, well, the Badenoch Great Place scheme is about 350,000, and then the Tomintoul and Glenlivet's about 3.5 million, roughly speaking. So we're at a much bigger scale than that. So that's what they're looking for. And then what we've done is to look at 3 areas that we're looking at, which is people, power and place. So this is really about a whole load of partnership around people and how we can involve people in the net zero. Because one of the key things for us is the 2030 target for net zero and the 2045 target, whilst they seem quite far off, are not very far off. A 75% reduction by 2030 is very, very close. And we can only do that if people want to come with us on that journey and actually want to do the things they need to do. So people are absolutely at the heart of this bid. It's about working with them. It's about working with a whole range of different partners on those things. And I'll come on and say a bit about these different areas of work. We're then looking at power, and it's about, well, how do we get people to make decisions, who makes decisions, and how we put in place the right things that happen across the park. In terms of climate conscious communities, we're looking at citizen assemblies or juries, community empowerment, the regional land use partnership side of things, community grant schemes and things like that. And then finally, it's the big place-based side of things, which is, I suppose, some of the stuff that people would associate with, I suppose, a climate change type approach, which is things like woodland regeneration, peatland regeneration, flood management, but then a big amount of work on active travel routes, especially in Badenoch and Strathspey, EV rollout, e-bike networks, all these things that we want to put in place, and actually some of the things has shifted a bit since even this slide, and that we're looking at some of the public transport options as well around that within the park as well. So I'll say a bit more about each of these in turn. But overall, at the moment, the vision for the Heritage Horizons bid is that by 2030, the Cairngorms National Park will be an exemplar of people and nature thriving together in a rapidly changing world. And I think what we wanted to get across there is that there are huge changes happening, as we know, even if you think about where we were last year when we put in our bid and where we are this year on the back of COVID and all the things that have happened. And then we know we've got new climate change targets coming out in December this year. We've got the COP next year. We've got the biodiversity COP next year. And then we've got all the green recovery side of things and the need to create jobs and to make sure we've got that sustainable economy going forward. So there's a lot of stuff we need to do there. And Heritage Horizons will hopefully provide some of that glue within the Cairngorms around that. I'll put up the next slide, which is a bit wordy, and I'm not expecting you to read all this, but it's just to try and give that we're trying to nail these things down in terms of what we're looking to do around the aims and objectives. And these are around really enhancing ecological and economic well-being. It's about the beliefs and behaviours and how do we get people to want to do the net zero side of things. It's about empowering people. It's about being an international showcase. It's about mitigating climate emergency. And it's about to place active travel at the heart of a greener future. So there's a whole load of different things in there, and I'll come on to that. And then there's some big cross-cutting principles that we want to try and take forward as well, which is around inclusion and diversity. So this is about how do we involve more people than we currently do in the decision making, and how do we get more people involved in this than we currently do. About system change, and say that if we're all talking about this green recovery or a well-being economy, well, what does that actually mean? What does that look like? How do you actually do that? So there's some big things around that. And then there's the knowledge exchange side, which is really about trying to make sure that we've got the right academic underpinning to this and also the right evaluation and monitoring associated with it all. The next slide, and again, don't worry, the main thing I'm going to talk about here are some of the projects. So it's the sort of fourth column in that says projects at the top. So these are some of the things that we're looking at. So there's a whole area around business development and well-being economy, and there's a whole project around that specifically about what does that mean? How do we work with businesses? How do we do things like circular economy? And how does that all come together in one package? There's the public health and the outdoor side, and that's a partnership with the NHS to look at the new hospital in Aviemore. How do we make best use of that? How do we integrate that with things like ranger services? How do we work? How do we use the active travel network that we're going to create better to try and ensure that we can do public health better within the Cairngorms, and how do we then show that to other places? And then we've been working quite closely with the dementia side of things to look at a new National Centre of Excellence around dementia activity, and that's quite well developed now, and that looks like it's going to be quite a key part of that side of things. There's then a whole load of climate learning and education, outreach and engagement, and community arts and culture. So this is about how do we get people to buy into the net zero, what does that mean for them, and how do we take them with us? And so there's some programs being looked at in terms of co-design. We've been working with young people across the park on that, and with alternative, other people within the park to try and look at participatory approaches and how we take that all forward. So that there's also a whole lot of business stuff within that as well, which doesn't come up on that so much at the moment, but we're working on that to try and put that in more within the final bid document as well. In terms of power, this is again around, we're looking at the citizen assembly and jury side of things and how we can maybe use those a bit more innovatively within the park, and also some of the things we've learned from COVID in terms of the fact that we're much more digitally online. How do we actually make that to mean that we can get more people involved in some of these decision making? So we're looking at the climate conscious community side of things, and then a community managed grant scheme, which we're looking at. I think the last time I looked at the figures for that were around about a £2 million grant scheme in the delivery phase that would be managed for communities by communities to actually do things within the national park. And then there's a whole load of stuff around the new regional land use partnerships, are a programme for government commitment, and we're looking at one of those for the Cairngorms National Park. How do we use that to release some of the things we know we need to do with land within the park? And then how do we use the land rights and responsibilities implementation to try and make sure that the things that are at the moment in terms of good words, how do we actually make that something that we can get out and to try and make that happen within the park as well? So there's work with that in terms of working with people like the Scottish Land Commission and others around that, and estates across the park. And then finally, there's the place-based side of things. And again, this is looking at, as I said, some of those big projects. So things like woodland regeneration, peatland restoration, climate resilient catchments, deer management, climate friendly farming, and then a landscapes and communities project, because we're quite aware that if you have quite a lot of these, what you call larger targets, how do we take people with us that live within those areas, and how do they get involved in that, and how do we actually try and make sure that it's being done with people and not done to people? So there's quite a big bit of work around that about, we want to talk to people about what they think or what they would like to see their landscapes look like in 2030 or 2045, and how we can engage people in that. And then finally, on the active side of things, we're doing work on an e-bike network for the park to look at that. We're looking at the Glenmore transport plan, so that's looking at what is the future of transportation within the Glenmore corridor up the Cairngorm Mountain, and some of the ideas we've got around longer term things around that in terms of how do we transport people from Aviemore and from the rail station up to Cairngorm and back, and how do we do that more sustainably in the future? We want to look at that in terms of planning that. There's the active travel in Badenoch and Strathspey, and that's really about trying to finish the network so that you will be able to get, in effect, from the north side, so from Granton and Spey to Newtonmore and Canusie in the south, and then looking at what we can do also further than that, but in terms of a core network that works in terms of off-road and very quiet road cycling and walking opportunities within the park, and it allows people to get between communities very easily. And obviously that links back to the e-bike side of things, it links back to the health side of things, it links back to being in nature side of things. So it's one of these things that ties it all together. And then we're looking at sustainable transport in Deeside and Angus, and that plays back a bit to the Glenmore side of things, but we're looking at electric buses or hydrogen buses, and how we can look at linking up different places within the park in a different way from what we've done in the past. And we're looking at certain places in terms of, in Deeside, looking at sort of Ballitard, Braemar corridor and some of the sites around that. Angus Glens has a specific issue of, well, not a specific issue, but it's got a lot of people want to get to the top of the glen. Is there a way that we can do that in a more sustainable way? And I've said before on the Glenmore transport side of things. So that's a very quick run through. In terms of the process is that we apply, as I said, we bid in February. And we bid in 2 stages. So if we get through that, we then get development phase funding for 2 years, which at the moment we're applying for. The total package for the development phase is about £2.4 million, of which we're looking for around about half of that from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. And then the delivery phase is then 2 years after that. So if I'm getting my years right, I'm in 2023 at that point, and 2023 for 5 years to 2028. And the package we're looking at for that is around £40 million in total for that package. of which about, I think we're looking at the moment, about £12 million from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and then other match funders within that. So that's the sort of totality of the project. It's still morphing a bit because we're still working with a whole range of partners, and at the moment we've got about 40 different partners involved in it, and it rises all the time, and we want to make sure that people are bought in and that it's something that's part of that. In terms of the Highland Council, I suppose there's two bits. Obviously, we've been working with Kate and Liz on this as well. We've chatted about this previously. We would obviously love to get the endorsement of Highland Council for the programme overall in the bid, because that's really key to us, is that the councils are bought into this. We've got a conversation happening in the next couple of weeks with officers as well around what it looks like and match funding associated with the development phase. And then there's a bigger conversation to be had with you guys around, I suppose, match funding and the delivery phase, but that's not a now conversation. That's something that we can do during the development phase in terms of how we might want to talk about that in terms of capital investment and other things that between us we might be able to lever in on the back of this bid as well. So I'll leave it there, and thanks very much for the opportunity to chat about it, and happy to take any questions on any aspects of it. And I'll put down the screen now once I find the button. There we are.
Ryan, is there any possibility that we could have a copy of that presentation? It'd be handy for the future. And also, as things progress, keep the 4 local members updated. I realise that Pippa will know more about this than we will because she's a member of the park board, but it'd be good to have us all updated. With respect to the endorsement of Highland Council, I personally do not see that as a problem, and I think the council will endorse that. Certainly, I'm expecting the area committee to do that, and if need be, the full council. So because I think this is so important to the area. Questions, John?
Thanks. That was all very encouraging, Grant. Is there a business plan about making money from this as we go along? There's an awful lot of outlays attached to this, but income generating, have you got a plan for businesses to come in that would be suitable as income generators for the park?
Yeah, absolutely, John. I mean, there's quite a lot of big opportunities in the park, I think, going forward on the business side of things. Even if you take, I'll take one example, peatland restoration. There's, the government commitment is for 250 million to peatland restoration over the next 10 years. The Cairngorms will have its peatland programme, and it's obviously part of the Heritage Horizon side of things. But the peatland side of things, there's plenty of opportunities for local contractors to get skilled up on something like peatland restoration. And it's not just a Cairngorms thing, that's a Scotland-wide potential business opportunity for people. And there are companies already doing that within the Cairngorms. And then, other things, plenty of contractor potential work on the infrastructure side of things across all of the different proposals. And obviously there will be jobs created directly from the project. We're looking at around about 10 posts for the development phase. Less sure for the delivery phase because obviously it's a bit further off, but there will be direct employment created as well by the project, and then there will be lots of other spin-offs from that. So I see jobs as being one of the key things around this in the future. And one of the other bits which is probably might be interesting for you is that we're also looking at, with good conversation yesterday, we'll probably be adding it into it with a finance group around the potential for bringing in private finance into some of these side of things in terms of green finance. So we're looking at that as a potential pilot during the development phase, and then something to then expand on in the delivery phase. So there's potentially some quite big things in there.
Thanks very much. That's very encouraging.
Muriel.
Thank you, Grant, and thank you, convener, for asking for the presentation. Grant, just on the back, you mentioned of every meeting that we attend, whether it's the ones that you set up during COVID, it's the travel and transport. Now that is a key driver that we need to address quickly and sustainably in the future, because that's one thing that the locals are really buying into and concerned about. And the other thing is, you mentioned local engagement. How do we actually reach out to the locals? Because the big survey that you presented at the last meeting I was at, there was a lot of people that visit and love our park, but they weren't actually locals living and working in the park. And the third one is you mentioned the peatlands and the available money for that. And I mean, that's a huge development and the correct thing to do. Is there any way that we can encourage and work with whoever the contractors are to look at local apprentices and get young people and get people involved in these schemes? Can we add some weight into that? Because it's really important that we offer opportunity to local young people that want an outdoor life.
Yeah, so I'll take the travel and transport. Absolutely, I think it's a key issue, and it's one that certainly is a big part of this bid. So that's definitely in there. In terms of engaging with local people, absolutely. I mean, I think that's what to my mind, that's what the 2-year development phase has really got to focus on, in terms of engaging with people all across the park about this in their own communities. And so we're looking at doing something in all the main communities within the park around this whole agenda. So how do we take this forward? So when we're talking about climate conscious communities, or we're talking about involving people more in their landscapes, it's about looking at different ways of doing that. So absolutely, that's at the core of what we're looking to do in terms of this programme. And then in terms of your point about the apprentices and things like that associated with peatlands, whilst, and it may be part of Heritage Horizons, or I suspect it probably sits slightly to the side. However, I think you're absolutely spot on, and it is something that we can. I think it's one of the things that certainly we were talking about that this morning, about an action to discuss with High about the potential to support. If we know we've got a 10 years worth of programme of peatland work within the Highlands, because it is setting aside the Cairngorms just for a second, but at a Highland scale, what do we need to do to make sure that, if you like, companies are skilled up to do that work? Because one of the main constraints on peatland work in Scotland at the moment is contractor capacity. So it's actually not having enough contractors to do all the demanded work within the Highlands. So there's definitely a business opportunity there. And there's definitely an opportunity for potentially High to maybe help with upskilling on some of those things in terms of contractors do other work, and then to look at apprentices and other things that can be added into that. So yeah, I think there's definitely room for work there. So it's one that is on our radar to try and do something about.
And with respect to transport, there's a huge amount of work being done by the council that can actually dovetail with this. So I think it would really be important that the council and the park get together and look at different ways of providing, or new ways of providing, public transport. Obviously from our point of view, particularly in Badenoch and Strathspey. And it's not limited to the type of vehicle, etc. It may involve different suppliers, etc., etc. So I think it'd be really worthwhile if senior officers of the council could get together with you and discuss this. And additionally, I think some more input regarding the council-sponsored transport group. I think it'd be important that if you dovetail with that more regularly.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Bill. Happy to do that. And I know that Pete and David Klein have been certainly in discussions with Richard Porteous on that side, in terms of the transport side. But I'll have a chat with them once I get back and see if there's other things we can tie into, and happy to do that. So happy to look at how we can make that work better as well.
Yeah, Richard's maybe not the person who would be leading on this, but I'm sure Liz will let you know after the meeting. Pippa.
I just wanted to say first, I'm really pleased to hear that contact be made. I've sort of put that forward to both independent parties, and it's great to see that it's an opportunity for people to work together. And I also wanted to add that Bill is right. As a board, we have had first sight of this, but it is very much the hard work and the dedication of the officers that have taken this forward. It really has been presented to us for information only, just as you guys have had now. And it is one of the most exciting opportunities I've seen so far to harness the change that we're currently undergoing. There's been a very large acknowledgement of the need for change. The pandemic has pushed that to happening now, whether we're ready for it, whether we like it or not. but this is the first instance I've seen of the ability and the capacity to be able to take that actually benefit and to be able to direct the change. And I'm very much looking forward to see the opportunities that this has for the council as a whole, as well as for the park board, brought into the public arena. Thanks very much for that information, Grant.
Does anyone have any further questions for Grant, or any points you want to make? So Grant, I think you've heard that we are very supportive of what you're trying to do here, and you know, the council will without doubt try and support wherever we can, but certainly during this initial phase, when you're just looking for the endorsement of the council, then I can assure you that members will ensure that that will happen. So thank you very much, and it's been really good to see you today.
Thanks very much, Bill, and thanks everyone else. Much appreciated, and have a good rest of your meeting. We'll see you later.
You're welcome to stay if you wish.
Oh, well, I mean, as much as I would love to. I mean, you know, I will leave you to it.
Thank you, man.
Cheers. Bye.
Yes. Members, item 5 on the agenda is the police area performance report, and I think we've got Vince Tough with us today. Vince, are you with us?
Yes, morning, Bill. I'm not sure if my camera's on. It is, I think.
It is now. Or
okay,
it was.
That's good. What? Is it?
It was, and now it's not.
Okay.
It is now.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
it.
All good, all good. Good morning, and thanks very much for the invitation this morning. Obviously, it goes without saying this year's been an exceptional year in terms of the changes across society, and also in terms of the challenges for policing. On the good side, in terms of crime levels across the area, certainly we've seen fairly noticeable drops in the crime levels across sort of the various areas. If we take the period the 1st of April to the 30th of September, there's been a notable drop in the people charged with drink driving offences. That's down 8 incidents. Speeding is again down, but I think that's reflected on the previous drop that we've seen over the past periods as well. House break-ins, they're down by 8 incidents, but basically most folk are at home these days, so I think that's obviously had an impact there. There is one slight rise. There's a rise in theft from motor vehicles. There's a wee spike there. It went up by 3 incidents, but effectively that was down to one individual that had been moving throughout the country. But working with the other divisions across Scotland, we were able to sort of tie all the incidents together. So that one individual's been charged, and he's not from our area, but he's certainly been charged with the offences there for that. Notably, there's been 21 less incidents of breaches of the peace, and 21 less assault charges, and 13 less recorded vandalisms. I think we'd have to take this year's figures as unique. I don't think there could be a baseline for any future crime figures. Obviously, a lot of folk have been stuck at home, and the licensed premises have seen a real restriction in their opening hours. And obviously, basically most, if not all, of our events have been cancelled. So certainly in terms of figures for this year, there's a lot of, it looks very encouraging, but I think we have to view them as unique. The challenges this year, however, it's really just been in continuing to provide a police service during a pandemic. There's been lots of unique challenges there. Obviously, policing can't be conducted from home, so we've had to, there's really been a balance to strike in providing a good level of service whilst keeping officers safe and at work. So there's kind of been the juggle there of combining those two factors. Initially for us, the real challenges were in getting the PPE situation right for the officers, getting the correct level of training and the supply chains up and running. So thankfully now we have good sort of PPE levels across for the officers there. Also, we've had additional responsibilities in helping out with the track and tracing. Sometimes particular individuals have been difficult to track down and trace, so we've been able to get involved in that in some of the communities. Our involvement in attending and reporting sudden deaths in the community, that's increased as well. but again, that's just to support the health service. So that was another change to our operating procedures. There's obviously been a lot of new legislation the officers have had to get their heads around. We've had to do some additional training for that. And obviously there's been all the additional calls to do with breaches of guidelines or the breaches of the legislation. So it's been a different picture in terms of policing. I would say that for ourselves, the key points have really been about being flexible in our sort of working sort of processes and the way we go about our business, and also being proportionate. I think it's fair to say that in terms of compliance across the area, compliance has been really good. We've had really good sort of assistance from the community. So I think I should really sort of put that on record. We're very fortunate where we live, and we do appreciate the levels of compliance across the area. I was asked a particular point about in terms of incidents of domestic abuse or mental health incidents, have we seen a real sharp and dramatic rise in reported cases? Just from my own observations, I would say that we haven't over the whole period, if you take it in as a whole, we haven't seen a dramatic rise. But that being said, this morning, for example, officers are tied up just dealing with a mental health related issue and also a domestic abuse case. So that's what we're tied up with just now. It's always represented a lot of our work, and I think it'll continue to do so as we go into the winter period. In terms of ongoing issues in the communities, just to touch upon, I'm aware of the concerns in Granton and Spey about antisocial driving, and I have had some contact with the elected members regarding that and the local community council. So what we've done is we've tried to make officers available. We've pulled in officers from Fort William, Inverness. We've tried getting some different vehicles, different officers involved. So at the moment, we've had over 10 antisocial behaviour orders issued against different drivers and vehicles. So that really is a high number for such a, for any one particular town. But I think there obviously is there's a particular age group that are particularly interested in their vehicles at the moment. I think that can often be cyclical, but as I say, in response to the concerns, we've had quite a lot of additional patrols in the area. Again, a feature that I've noticed recently is that we've had quite a few complaints about groups of teenagers hanging about. I think that can probably be tied back to the fact that a lot of our youth clubs, some of the football clubs, rugby clubs, shinty clubs, I know from my own experience they're just not on the go at the moment. So again, that's, we've had reports about kids and teenagers hanging about. So hopefully, that'll drop off as we get some of these clubs going again. I think it just shows you just the value of these clubs actually in the area. So again, I think looking forward, we're just going to have to be, again, as I say, just flexible and proportionate. The vast majority of people, when we speak to them, give them a bit of education, explain the issues, they do take on board the concerns and they do sort of amend their behaviour. So looking back, really, I'm actually pretty thankful to be where we are in terms of communities and as a service in terms. So and yeah, very sort of hopeful for the forthcoming year. But yeah, really just open it to any questions.
Thanks, Vince. It's been a difficult year for everyone, probably especially yourselves more than anyone else. It's been difficult to deal with, but I'm sure we'll get through this in the end. I think you're definitely right regarding the antisocial behaviour from kids. They've got nowhere to go and nothing to do, and kids are kids, and we need to make allowances for that. And we need to really make an effort to get things up and running for them as fast as possible, and that will maybe occupy their energies elsewhere, in places like Carbridge, etc., where there's been recent complaints. We really need to make the effort. Muriel.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Inspector, for your report, and thank you for your team's prompt action and replying to emails about the incidents that you mentioned in Grant, and I really appreciate your help with that. And certainly, I have noticed a difference. It's certainly much quieter in the evenings. I think, you know, there's also public perception as well about some of the young people, and I know a lot of the clubs are not there, but some of the young people that are gathering, they're actually very pleasant, because I've walked past them with my dogs, and there's, you know, nice dogs. So, you know, we need to be careful not just target young people as being potentially causing any issues. Regarding the car thing, that is quite a high number, and I'm just wondering, I know with no resource, I know how your teams are stretched as well, but if we could look at collaborative with any groups, have like car maintenance schemes, better driving schemes, you know, somewhere like that. I know it worked in central in Glasgow many years ago, and I'm just wondering if it's something that we could look at in the future to do that. And a heartfelt thanks to your teams that are supporting our other services and learning all these new laws and supporting our other services. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, members? No, Vince, I think it's just for us to say thank you very much for all your... Sorry, Pippa.
Sorry, it wasn't a question. I wasn't sure whether or not it was appropriate, but I will say it, seeing as you've drawn attention. It was just to say, I noticed that you've mentioned in there that your domestic abuse and incidents, mental health incidences, have remained around average. But I certainly have heard some very glowing reports of your officers attending, things that potentially the 101 dismissed as irrelevant, but when fed back to a local level, they've had a really positive response, and they've come away feeling that they've been listened to and cared for during this time by our local police force. And I just wanted to highlight that with you and to say thank you. As a local member, I've really seen the difference your force has made with their compassion.
Thank you for that. I should say I just replied to your email shortly ago, so but we were just trying to get somebody locked up, so I was keen to get them locked up and then get their email done. So,
John.
Thanks. Vince, is there anything, any plans in hand if we have an almighty invasion for New Year with people coming up from the south? Because we've seen this threat before when we were talking about closing snow gates and things. Have we got anything up our sleeve for New Year?
Obviously, we've been in contact with the local organisers, so there's no events planned at the moment, and I think that would impact anybody's decision to travel, because we do have the greatly reduced licensing hours at the moment. If there's no events for people to travel to, I think that should really have a big impact on anybody thinking about travelling. I think later this week there's going to be discussions at the government level in terms of, you know, how we're looking at people travelling across the different tiers, so that may well impact things as well. So, but yeah, I think, you know, across those two factors, hopefully that will limit people thinking about travelling north. Certainly, we haven't seen a great number of people travel, you know, for obviously the events have been cancelled. Licensed premises, they've really, it's been local people. We haven't had any issues to do with folk travelling for drink at the moment. So, but it's certainly an issue we'd keep an eye on.
Vince, I appreciate you're desperate to get away and carry out your day job. So if no one else has got any point, we'll leave you in peace.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thanks. Members, item 6 is the HRA Capital Programme, and I think we've got Jonathan Henderson here. Yes, we do. Jonathan.
Morning, Convener. I'm pleased I was at the meeting from the start today. It's been very, very interesting, and I hope that nobody is underwhelmed by the simplicity and the brevity of my contribution. I'll just draw out a couple of points from the report, if that's okay. I mean, essentially, I think the key thing to note is the priority identified within the report for spend against energy efficiency measures in our stock. So that is indicated in Appendix 2, and this priority does connect with the strategic commitment towards an increase in energy efficiency spend, which was outlined in the strategic paper to Housing and Property Committee back in August. Section 7 also gives a very brief update, I recognise, on the current programme, which is now back underway. I intend to bring a detailed report to next area committee with spend against budget on the current year programme, and have made arrangements already with Liz to attend your next ward business meeting to give a more specific update just in relation to that. And also at that ward business meeting, I think it's on the 7th of December, I would look to present to members the specific address detail which relates to the programme that you have in front of you today. So happy to take any questions, convener.
Members, any questions? Looks like you've escaped very lightly today, Jonathan. Pippa.
I couldn't help but come in with one, Jonathan. Thanks very much for taking this report to us today. It was just to ask, with regard to some of the heating replacement programs, I noticed you put them down there. Are you finding that there's a difficulty in gaining access to tenants' houses due to the new COVID and the restrictions, or are you finding that it's actually easier for people to be able to vacate and make room for what can be quite a prohibitive, situation where things are coming out and going in, and there can be a wee bit disrupted for a few days? Is all that becoming easier or harder?
Thanks, Councillor Hadley. That's a really interesting question, and quite pertinent now that the programme is back underway. The programme was suspended effectively for the last 6 months or so, and we've now put in place new procedures in line with the government guidance just to ensure that any works that we carry out are safe. And it has been interesting to note the real desire from our tenants who are on the current heating programme to get their heating replaced. I think that it's probably with the assurance that we're able to give in respect of the way that we are working that offers that confidence to tenants that things can be carried out safely. I think it's worth saying that there will be a few opt-outs in relation to people's concerns about tradesmen being in houses, but I think in previous years we have just accepted the fact that someone has opted out and then looked to induct another address into the programme. However, in the circumstances, any opt-outs as a consequence of concerns that tenants have at the moment, we'll just keep that in hand, and we'll just revisit that install at the point when that tenant is comfortable to proceed. One of the main challenges, just to touch on that, now that you've got me thinking, is, and we've spoken about this before at Ward Business, is the difficulty that we're actually having in respect of getting meter changes in advance of the heating installations taking place. Now that's an issue which is broadly out with our control. We're trying to work as much as we can with SAC in particular to affect those meter changes, but that is a challenge at the moment, and I do see that as being a continuing challenge over the next few months.
Jonathan, have we made a definitive decision regarding the types of heating that we will use as replacements yet?
I think, convener, we have a heating options appraisal which we carry out on every planned installation, which appraises the property and looks towards what the best option would be for that particular property. So it's with an open mind that we look at every property. There are some technologies which we've tried in the past which have been more successful than others, and I think that we are looking towards new technologies at the same time as well. And again, we've discussed that previously at Word Business, where some of these emerging technologies are very much worth testing out in greater detail.
A final question from me is, how is the percentage of the HRA capital plan allocated to Badenoch and Strathspey calculated? It's maybe not necessarily for you today, but it's maybe for a different strategic committee. but it'd be interesting to know how the percentage is decided upon.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, that is a matter which is, I suppose, approved or agreed at Strategic Committee, Housing and Property Committee, but essentially the calculation is based on stock number, stock type, okay, stock age. So it's a kind of reasonably developed calculation which applies what we would call a major repair allowance per stock type and age, which is a kind of UK government accepted approach, which then, when you divvy it all up, it works out what the level of investment required is per area. But again, that's something for Strategic Committee.
Yeah, I may ask the same thing at Strategic Committee then, because sometimes I'm not entirely convinced. I don't mean necessarily in this circumstance. Sometimes I'm not convinced that Badenoch and Strathspey gets its fair share of capital allocation. Muriel.
Thank you, and apologies if you saw me shaking my head earlier on. I couldn't find my notes that had when I'd read the paper, so you'll not be surprised. I did have a question, Jonathan. A couple of things. Obviously there's been delays, and we all understand. Is the budget ring-fenced for those delays? It won't be taken off next year's budget. Is it, because we'd already allocated that. And possibly at our next our next meeting, if we could maybe have a wee discussion about the various heating systems, because I'm not clear that there are so many options, and I think in the past we've had obviously the challenges of the boilers and the wood chips and all that sort of stuff. And the other thing is, have you as a team noticed an increase in antisocial behaviour complaints? I don't know. I seem to have had quite a few coming in to me at council level, but overall, have the team had any increases with that?
Not sure antisocial behaviour falls within Jonathan's remit, Muriel. But Jonathan, carry on.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks, Councillor Coburn. Yeah, I'm confident Sandra will be able to pick up on the antisocial behaviour query as part of the Housing Performance Report. In relation to the other two, all previously approved programmes are planned to go ahead. So the delay is only that. So we're going to progress as soon as we can on everything which has been previously approved, accepting that things will take longer. But I'd hope to go into more detail in relation to that in that paper to next area committee that I mentioned, and through further discussion at ward business as well. In respect to the heating systems, absolutely, I would really welcome a conversation in detail at ward business meeting, and perhaps in advance of that, I'll just put together a briefing which outlines the various options that we currently consider, and perhaps the pros and the cons of each, and the type of decision-making process that we go through in order to reach that decision.
Thanks, Jonathan. I think that's everyone. Thanks for your report today. It's good. We'll now move on to item 7, which is the Housing Performance Report, and we've got Sandra and David Wood. Sandra.
Thank you, Convener. Members, this is the usual update on housing performance and reporting on performance on Q2, which is to September 2020. In terms of the housing repairs service, a slight increase in time taken to deal with emergency and non-emergency repairs. This is really due to the additional tasks involved in reacting to the COVID issue. But however, the repairs timescales are still within target for Badenoch and Strathspey. Relet times over the 35-day target. Members will be aware that during the lockdown period, there was a suspension on allocations. The area team restarted allocation as soon as it was possible to do so. Just on relets as well, members, we took handover of some of our Power Bridge properties last week in our new development, and we'll get the remaining properties in January, so that's some good news. Table 4, rent arrears. Rent arrears have increased. This is the trend across all areas of Highland. We're seeing an increase in universal credit cases and an increase in the levels of rent arrears. It is expected that we'll probably see an impact on that performance indicator for some time to come. Our area team have contacted tenants in arrears. We have been unable to contact some tenants. We haven't been able to get a response from some tenants. We have restarted just this week issuing arrears notices to tenants. So really important for tenants to contact the team to discuss rent arrears. We can make repayment arrangements, and we can also signpost to specialist agencies like CAB and our own Highland Council welfare team. 6 homeless presentations in the quarter, members. The further performance data, Appendix 1, no red indicators for Badenoch, which is really good performance. Happy to take any questions, members.
Thanks, Sandra. It was on your last point. I noticed that the homeless presentations have fallen through the floor. Is that anything to do with the fact that anything to do with COVID in particular? And maybe in a wee while, Muriel will ask you the question that she asked Jonathan, which
it's difficult to understand sometimes the homeless trend. So where we've got peaks and troughs, it's difficult to actually identify why homeless presentations reduce. It's something that we do monitor quite closely, but there's nothing obvious around why we would suddenly see a drop. What we'll probably see is an increase next quarter when we come back to committee and report it.
Yeah. Muriel, do you want to ask your question from last time?
Thank you. You can answer it, Sandra. Thank you.
I can, yes. There's nothing obvious in an increase in antisocial behaviour cases across the area. Happy to discuss any particular cases with members. Just come in and speak to me about anything that's causing you concern. But there's nothing that we're seeing that's indicating any particular issue.
That's good. I think it's possibly perceptions because more people are at home and perceptions. That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions, members? No. Sandra, thank you very much. A comprehensive report as per usual, and we'll look forward to seeing the next one, which will hopefully be just as good.
Thank you, Convener.
Thanks, Sandra. Members, item 8 is the Area Road Structures Annual Report. And I believe we've got Richard Porteous. Richard.
Hello, Chairman, members. Yes, so this report is entitled the Area Road Structures Annual Report for last year, 2019-20. Very much self-explanatory. I draw your attention, I suppose, to 5.2, which highlights the area revenue budget that we have for bridges repairs, which is at £34,595. We have principal inspections undertaken for bridges in the area, which are carried out by our colleagues in the project design unit for our large bridges. And completion rate for those inspections that year was 100%. They also carry out general inspections, which are less comprehensive but more frequent for large bridges in the area too. So those were also 100% completed. We have an area technician who covers Badenoch and Strathspey and Nairn and Inverness, and he carries out general inspections on smaller bridges and culverts in the area, and his inspections are also 100% complete, which is very satisfying because these area technicians have been in post now for a couple of years at the most, but already our programme is coming on track. There is a slight backlog still in the area, which is noted in the report, and obviously now that we're in this better position, we're getting on top of that as well. What actual work have we done in the area? Well, section 12.3 highlights reactive work which was done with that £34,595, and you can see it's very quickly accounted for when accidents occur through road traffic collisions or we get storm damage, and that fully accounted for that budget last year. So it doesn't leave us very much breathing room or room to work with in terms of other more minor maintenance, which is described in 12.2, things like parapet repairs, bridge deck cleaning, etc. However, we can recover a large proportion of our accident damage if the culprit is known, which often it is. So we managed to therefore get through our small scale bridge repairs on that basis, generally speaking. For larger items, we're also able to bid into HQ funds for capital money, and we do have sometimes an element of area capital that we can spend on bridges as well, although we tend to have to bid into HQ. Other structures mentioned are retaining walls, large culverts and cattle grids. Now that we have the bridge inspection programme up in a good position, then we're able to expand that. And so that has been done for cattle grids, and there's a table in section 14.1 which highlights the outcome for Badenoch and Strathspey. We renewed 2 cattle grids last year, one at Tullach and one at Lettach, and we've got another one programmed this year at Glenbanker, which is a large deer grid. And culverts and retaining wall inspections tend to be ad hoc at the moment, but we've got being prepared to formalise those inspections as well. So that is a summary of the report. Happy to take any questions on that and on any other roads aspects, and also give a brief update on our position with roads, cyclical work and preparations for winter and anything else. Thank you.
John. You're on mute, John.
We're going now. Okay, Richard, sorry, I had the thing up about the bridges that are in scoring below 65 BCI. What's the scheduled date for taking action on these? I mean, with your inspections, it's rather worrying to see these sort of figures. And I'm just wondering when there might be repairs carried out.
Thank you, Councillor Bruce. Yes, it's a common question, that. The way the figures are presented perhaps elicits a bit more alarm than is necessary. It's a method of recording the findings and categorizing the bridges. It doesn't mean and it's on a relative scale, so they're in a quite serviceable position at the moment, but because they're at one end of the scale, it requires us to keep closer attention on those bridges. Means their inspections are more frequent, but it doesn't mean there's an urgent requirement for works. If that serves as any reassurance, hopefully it will.
I think the bridge at Cromdale is the one that's causing most concern. I keep getting emails in from the residents of the area saying another bit's fallen off. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, well, what I'll do is I'll get a report back for you on the Cromdale Bridge. I'm aware that that has been on in that category for quite some time, which sort of illustrates my point, I guess. But yeah, I'll certainly get a report back to you on that bridge.
Okay, thanks very much.
Uriel.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard, for the report. Just a couple of quick questions. You mentioned the culvert inspections. I'm concerned that we need support to support you getting these things done, because with the amount of rain and the amount of washout, we have a problem, and then it's creating a bigger issue. So that was the other one. And the other one was all the plans and the scheduled timetable that you kindly gave us for this year, because of COVID and everything, we've not been, that's not happened. So how are we going to get catch up with things like lining in some of our towns and villages? Because I understand that we don't have access to the lining machine as often as possibly is required, and particularly where we are playing catch up, if that makes sense.
Absolutely does make sense. Thank you. Very good question. I'll just take them in reverse order. The lining, we've reached the time of year when lining is very difficult due to the weather, unfortunately, wet weather and cold weather, but particularly wet weather. And then we reach a point about now, really in the late November, when lining is no longer possible and we have to wait to the spring. We've also got salt on the road as well now, although we've only had one treatment, amazingly, so far in Badenoch and Strathspey. But we're very aware of that. And yes, basically lining stopped during lockdown. And then there was a limited window when it started up again at the last couple of months in the season. We did have availability actually from, but obviously they were in heavy demand and works were prioritised. General works, to answer your other question that came to committee, very good point. During lockdown, all works basically stopped until the council was able to review its position again, budgetarily. So there's certain items which were prioritised, which were, if we get a weather window for those type of works, we would try to achieve either in this last bit of good weather before winter really sets in, or in probably more likely in the spring. Again, we've had a mild autumn. We may end up having a harsh spring, so it might be difficult. So anything that's under the capital programme, which is really what we're talking about here, we're hoping that capital will be carried over. And so those priorities will get done, but it may well actually be in next financial year. So in this area, that was Finlarig Road, Myrtle Field surfacing, we'd identified patching out on the Dava Road, the main A road, the A939, and there's actually a new issue come up, which is a culvert, funnily enough, down at Crewman Moor. So those are the priorities that are top of the list at the moment. And culverts, yeah, culverts range from a 6-inch pipe under the road to a 6 meter, which could almost be called a bridge, a box culvert or something. So there's a huge range of sizes. So the ones that would come under the bridge inspection team would generally be the larger ones, and and those are the ones that are recorded in number in the report at the beginning on in section 4.2. But there's a great many other smaller culverts, and I think probably, well, when you're mentioning making sure that they're kept clear, these are the ones that are often critical, the smaller ones. So yes, we're keeping on top of that. We've actually had the gully emptier in the area, and the programme is complete for the roadside gullies. It has a jetter on it, that machine as well, and we've cleared a lot of the smaller culverts with that. The wider problems that we tend to get with flooding in Badenoch and Strathspey, particularly in a couple of areas, I know in Granton-on-Spey at South Street and Castle Road East, tend to be more to do with the capacity of the shared drainage system. if we get heavy rain. The water does drain away, but it often can't get away quick enough in a downpour situation. So we're aware of these issues, and we try to keep the infrastructure clear so that it can get away as fast as it can. But to resolve some of these would require significant investment.
John. You're on mute again, John.
Oh.
You're still on mute.
You can hear me now. Richard, Shankton Court in Grantown. Is anything going to be done about that? That's been talked about for quite a long time.
Thanks, Councillor Bruce. If I didn't mention that just now in my list of priorities, I should have done. It's there on the list. Yeah. Thank you.
Richard, we really appreciate you taking questions which are not necessarily about the capital report, because it's quite a long time between now and the next area committee. And also, it's really good to see that we're getting one of the new snowplows. You know, for once, Badenoch and Strathspey is actually ahead of the game rather than struggling to get equipment. But you know, one thing I'd really like to raise, you know, everyone will have noticed that there's a new process going forward, whereas Aviemore will be converted into basically a 20 mile/hour limit zone. Hopefully, at almost no cost to the council. And also that, you know, places like Carbridge are talking about using similar processes. But my big question is, what about everywhere else? You know, there are demands from all across Badenoch and Strathspey, communities wishing to reduce to 20 mile/hour speed limits. And I really think it's particularly important that we think about things like that. So just maybe like you to maybe tell us if there's anything on the go.
Well, yes, there's things on the go, and I hear exactly what you're saying. And yeah, it's not just Badenoch and Strathspey either. Of course, it's the whole of the Highlands and Scotland, I guess. There's a lot of enthusiasm for reducing speed limits in villages and towns around Scotland, and there's a lot of widespread support for it. Obviously, these are improvements that require funding, and that's the biggest problem that Highland Council has, and we have in Badenoch and Strathspey at the moment. The council we have a road safety team in our team based in HQ, and they're responsible for rolling out some of the 20 mile/hour schemes and others like Safer Routes to Schools. This year they've got some additional Safer Routes to Schools funding, and where they can, where there's some overlap, they're managing to see some of the 20 mile/hour scheme aspirations accommodated within that. Apart from that, it is a small budget that they have, and it's been slow progress, as you're aware, very aware, over the last 3 or 4 years since 2016. So it's fantastic that we're able to use some of the spaces for people money to get a result for Aviemore. But yeah, the list in this area includes, as you say, Carbridge, but Lagan's been mentioned, Kincraig as well, King-Usie. So the resource financially in trying to pay for infrastructure improvements, also resource in terms of officer time to deliver these schemes is what's lacking. Having said that, they're being quite innovative and pragmatic in the road safety team at the moment, and anywhere where there is a desire, they're establishing the extents of those schemes, producing drawings so that they're shovel ready when the money is found. So that is greatly to their credit, and that includes traffic counts and speed surveys as well as design work. Thank you.
That's really appreciated, Richard. And with that, members, I would like to add an addition to the recommendation that the council agrees to bring forward proposals to introduce temporary 20 mile/hour speed restrictions in all areas of Badenoch and Strathspey currently served by existing 30 mile/hour limits. these proposals to be considered at the next Badenoch and Strathspey Area Committee. And I look for a seconder for that. Muriel.
I'll second.
Does anyone disagree?
Not at all, wholeheartedly agree.
So, obviously, members, this will be finance dependent, but there are tranches of finance around, such as spaces for people being used in Aviemore and has been suggested in Carbridge in particular. But there are potential right across the board, and this is what our communities want. It's not a question of this is an airy-fairy idea. Our communities want to see this. So hopefully sometime in the very, very near future, we'll be able to bring forward at least proposals so that people know what we could do if and when money becomes available. So thank you. Richard, again, really thanks very much to you and your guys for the amount of effort and time you put into this. And hopefully in one way we will have a very quiet winter. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members, next on the list is item 9, which is from Stuart. It's the West Highlands and Islands amended core path review. Stuart.
Thank you, Convener. Good afternoon, members. I'm here to present the responses to the public consultation to the proposed changes on the core paths in the Badenoch and Strathspey area, which is covered by the West Highlands and Islands core path plan review. Those responses are presented in Appendix 1 with the Badenoch and Strathspey feedback at the top and shaded blue. I'm also here to ask you to approve the submission of an amended core path plan. Members might recall seeing the proposed changes back in June 2019. The reason I'm coming back to you to ask for your support again is because we've had an objection to one of those proposals. That objection came from Ben Alder Estate, and it was to the proposal that the paths around Courtyard Woods in Dalwhinnie be made core paths. Now, the estate feels that the designation would attract more walkers to an already intensively managed area, being managed quite intensively now and will be for the next 10 years for forestry. It feels that there's no parking on the junction with the existing core path and the A889 just outside the village. It feels that the forest road to the loch side is steep, has steep sides, my apologies, 2 side drains. And it thinks that the walkers and cyclists that use that track will pose a significant health and safety conflict with timber lorries. They don't think the line is correct, and initially, you're quite right, the initial line that I proposed was not correct, and that the fences that had been erected with Scottish Forestry's approval would conflict with that line. In response to the objection, I'd suggest that yes, the designation will increase the size of the network and will hopefully increase the number of walkers in and around about Courtyard Woods. The start of the existing track to the core path at the junction with the A889 is already signposted. There is alternative parking in the village, which is promoted in the village's own community paths leaflet. The forest road is wide. People can still seek refuge at the sides. Many other core paths elsewhere across the Highlands are also used for timber extraction. And whether it be a core path or not, those access rights will still apply to those roads. I do propose correcting the line and putting a new line in Appendix 2 of the papers. The forest fences, cattle grids and kissing gate don't unfortunately meet the UK forestry standards for accommodating public access. And you'll see there's kissing gates next to cattle grids. Of course, the one group of users that would exclude is horse riders. The combination of the cattle grid and the kissing gate doesn't really work for them, unfortunately. And while there might not be too many in this area, we are finding across Highlands more and more adventurous trekkers going across country. So with that in mind, can I ask you to note the comments? And could I ask also for your support for the submission of the plan with the edited review and with the outstanding objection, which is likely to result in a public local inquiry.
Stuart, I notice also that the National Park are fully supportive of your proposals.
Yes, you're quite right, Convener. They responded to the proposals, and they felt that the proposals tied in well with what the community had in its local walks leaflet.
Members, any questions for Stuart? Stuart, is there any way we can actually beef up this recommendation? It really says that we approve the core path plan. Is that the maximum we can do to support you in this?
Well, Convener, yes, I think us showing we've gone through the due process with consulting you back in June 2019 and consulting you here does help, and it shows the sort of political backing for our proposals. So it'll go down on the submission to the reporter when that local inquiry comes up.
Uriel.
Stuart, thank you for the detail of the report. I am concerned that about the objection, but just a bit of an update. There is going to be more parking in Dalwhinnie for going up the hill, and that's well established. The land has been given over, and that's all in the public domain just now. That's through the community council, so there is going to be more parking in the area. Just for more information for you.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. Is that next to the station?
Yes. John may have more detail on it.
Yeah, yes, it's down at the entrance to the Ben Alder estate. Ardberic is given some land over for extending the car parking.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, with that, members, can we agree the recommendation?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I think, Stuart, you get that we support you fully in this, and it's not a question of any, I suppose, split decision. We fully support what you're trying to do here. And thank you.
Thank you.
Members, item 10 is the education report, and Fiona Shearer is with us this morning.
Morning, good morning, members. I'm just going to call Nikki in. Nikki Grant wanted to join us as well, so we've just been here with me. Sorry. I think that's. Is she there? Am I able to do that, Liz, as an attendee, or do you have to do it? Oh, that's it now. I think that's it now. She was waiting to come on.
I think as long as Nikki has the Teams invite that Lorraine issued and clicks on that link, that should be able to facilitate her coming into the meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. She was waiting there anyway, just to come on. So thank you, thanks, Kate. So thank you, and morning, afternoon even, members. So the education report that was put in for you was an update report. We have used the format that we had discussed previously, but I'm happy to take any comments on that, and it's just really to take any questions. We did include an update there around the moving towards 1140 for ELC, which I know some of you had wanted to discuss. Well, there's Nikki in now. And just to update as well that in terms of attainment, as agreed at the Education Committee in September, and I think there's some information going to the committee next week as well around how officers will engage at ward business meetings and be able to have more in-depth discussions with officers around individual schools' attainment. Hi, Nikki.
Fiona, I don't think some of these links are particularly easy to use, so I think maybe in future committees they need to be highlighted better. And it's very difficult to go through the process to get to an individual school. In fact, half the time it only takes you to the 3 special schools in Highland and doesn't allow you to look at other schools. I've tried it on several occasions, so just to bring that to your attention.
That's fine. We can go through that then. Would it be better then if we go back to what we previously did, where we extracted the data? I think we were trying to I think I'm going back probably a year and a half, where we'd had discussions around trying to make the report less sort of cumbersome, which was to have the links in. But if you prefer, we can extract that data and just put it in. Is it?
No, I'm happy to have the links there, just to make sure that the links actually take you somewhere, rather than through a long process to get there.
Okay, I'll make a note of that. And I'm happy to take any other questions on the report.
Nikki, you want to come in?
Hi, Councillor Lobin, and it was just to say that our attainment paper has gone out, so it went out yesterday, and you'll notice at the back of the attainment paper there's actually a toolkit for scrutiny. So I think, Fiona, moving forwards, the data that Councillor Lobin has just asked for, what we'll do is we'll put it out in an attainment pack, rather than having to click on all the links. And what you can then do is you can go through section by section, and what you'll note from the committee next week is that toolkit actually takes you through the questions and also the data that you've got. So you've got the questions in front of you, and then officers or head teachers can come to the meeting, and you can have that engagement and a deeper engagement and deeper conversation around the data, which is why you're here. You're here to look at the data, to look at the highlights from, numeracy or literacy, your positive destinations. And then, as a team working together, you can then think about what the action plans are to raise attainment for your communities. So I think we need to highlight that next week, Fiona, and ensure that the members at the meetings have got that data pack, so you can have the conversations, rather than have the format that you've got just now, which I know you don't have a lot of information within it. You want to get into the guts of the school and have the conversations. So, I'll just give you a couple of examples just now. Within, can you see in the whole SG with the primary schools, just from the data and reading the data, I can quite clearly see, so in terms of your primary 1 data, your primary 4 data, and your primary 7 data, that your primary 7s within the Can You See ASG are above average for reading, for writing, for numeracy, and for literacy, and that's both at Highland level and also at national level. So, we can talk around things like that. And also, I think, I would say to you, within the Can You See ASG primary schools, there needs to be a bit of work around your primary 4s and all of those key measures. So again, you could have that conversation with the head teacher to say, how are you focusing on your literacy? What are you doing? Is it on a daily basis? How can parents support? How can we support you? Just some data again from the Granton primary schools data. So again, what I can see just now is that your primary 1s, in terms of writing, listening and talking, they're well above average. Okay, so I don't know what you're maybe doing within your nursery schools, but that data and what the nursery schools are doing, that needs to be highlighted across, the Highland Council, because we need to take the good practice from that. And I can also say that your primary 7s, in terms of their numeracy, again, are well above sort of national and Highland averages. So we need to be thinking about, what is that primary 7 teacher doing? Why is that data so good? And again, how can we share that practice? That was just a couple of things that I've taken from the primary data, and I'm quite happy, along with Fiona, to come back to another meeting to go through it in much more detail. In terms of the secondary schools, so your Can You See data, I can see from the data that you're doing very well in terms of attendance. So you're sitting at 92% attendance. There's a real strength in terms of achievement of a level. So for your young people in S3, all of your young people are achieving level 3 in both numeracy and literacy. And most importantly, I would say to you just now, for those young people that are accessing free school meals, you're doing very well for those young people. Also at sort of national 5 level for maths and English, Can You See are well above average. And just as a focus in terms of Can You See, I would say that your young people that are sitting in levels 3, 4 and 8 for their SIMD index, you could be doing better. So, from a school perspective, what I'd be doing, and as a member, I would be saying, who are your young people that are in SIMD 3? Can you identify them? Who are your young people within SIMD 4? Who are they? And how can we better achieve the outcomes for me? What's going wrong with those young people and how can we support them? Is it a course that we're sitting at the wrong level? Are we not thinking about wider achievement? And that's the type of conversations that you can be having to try and move that data on. The grant in ESG, the grant in secondary school, again, I'll go through some data. So they're currently sitting at 89% attendance. So that would be something that I'd be going back to the head teacher to talk about. Why is it sitting at 89%? It's below average. What types of things can you do? Do you have an attendance officer? Are you making sure that your young people are coming in for first period? If they're not coming in for first period, what are you doing? Are you phoning home? Are you texting home? What is the issue around that? And that's just a couple of questions I'd be asking. In terms of level 3 numeracy and literacy, at S3, again, they're below average. So I'd be thinking about, okay, what are we doing in S1 and S2 to make sure that our young people have got the numeracy and literacy levels when they come into S3? Can we be working closely with the ESG? Is there a numeracy and literacy plan that we can be looking at? What other areas are doing well? And again, that's just some conversations that I would be having with the head teacher. The real positive is that they're above average. So for your national 5 young people in S4, you're above average for literacy and numeracy. So again, that's kind of bucking the trend. So, what are the classroom teachers doing? Have you got an additional period for numeracy and literacy? What is it that's making that cohort so good? In terms of the SIMD index, it's the young people, again, in SIMD 2, SIMD 6, and a couple of young people in 10 that we could be doing better for. So that's your most affluent young people. So my questions would be, what are you doing in S6 to improve attainment? Are you making sure that your young people are following courses? Are they staying on courses? And are you building on prior attainment? But that's just a couple of things from me. And I'm quite happy to, have a deeper conversation around it. I quite enjoy that type of data, but I'm quite happy to focus on things. Have you got any questions for me, members, just around what I just said just now?
Nikki, thanks very much for that, because basically that level of information is something that has been severely lacking in the past. That's really appreciated, and the fact that you're going to change the way it's reported to us, it sounds to be really, really important, because it's exactly the sort of information that we would need. And I think that's really great. It's much appreciated. Muriel. Thank you, and thank you. I can only concur what convener has said about the level of data. It's what we need. Just a couple of questions. I'm hoping that some of the data that you've given us, there will be a period of settlement, because we've had acting heads, acting deputy heads, and we seem to be hopefully in a stronger position for that. So that is one. And the granting thing, I think we can sort of trace back as to why the primary and the early years, why that's got to where it is post-inspection. One of the things that I'm really, really keen on, and you know this, Nick, is the SIMDs, and I'm really keen that we capture the transition from primary 7 to S1. In the primary setting, there is a greater contact with ESN and more one-to-one and accessibility of support. Now, we don't have that accessibility, that same accessibility at senior school. Now, this to me causes two issues. You can be losing a bit and overwhelming that young person, needs that extra support, but equally the middle 40% as well can potentially be losing it as well. And I think this is where we need to do a bit of work as a team, and I'd welcome your views on that. And is it a case of we're looking at our ESN support? Should it follow the young person through their education system, or what? And that's where I'll come to you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. It's quite, it's very relevant in terms of the question that you've just asked me there just now. So I suppose that's kind of twofold. So what you've said there is, so young people probably within SIMD 1 and 2, are we ensuring that ESN support is following them? I suppose my question to you would be, around SIMD 1 and 2, we're also talking about vulnerability, we're potentially talking about SCBN, and it's not always naturally ESN that falls between SIMD 1 and 2. So So I think we need to clarify that. I mean, one of the key things at the ASN workshop we've got next week, one of the key things that officers will talk to you about is potentially, going into an ESG, thinking about the level of need within that ESG, and then the head teachers having a discussion about how they're going to problem solve and troubleshoot for that young person. So that, as you've said there just now, that the level of resource and the need follows the young person from primary to secondary, which includes, the relationship that they've built up, but also the progressions that they've made from primary to secondary. So, it's a conversation that will continue next week. You'll be aware as well in terms of the PEF and the SAC monies, so the pupil equity funding and the Scottish Attainment Challenge funding. Paper that we have submitted for next week talks about there's going to be some audit and scrutiny around the pupil equity funding and the Scottish Attainment Challenge funding, and the Scottish Government are going to be working with some of our schools and some of our officers to identify that new attainment gap, which every time you kind of go to Education Committee, it's a key question. What is the new attainment gap? So we've got 4 schools that are involved in the audit just now. They're actually in conversations just now. The young people are going to be in focus groups, talking about their health and well-being, talking about numeracy and literacy, and talking about that level of support that you've just spoken about just now. But we're hoping to bring another paper in February to really focus in on that attainment gap and have further conversations around how we're going to support the attainment gap moving forwards. So I hope that I've answered your question there just now.
I think one thing we need to bear in mind, Nikki, is that SIMD often doesn't really get into the depths of rural deprivation. It's very useful more in built-up areas, etc. But in an area like ours, SIMD is sometimes very questionable. So I think sometimes we need to look beyond it.
And agreed, and that's when you have that conversation with the head teacher, you get into the individual stories of the young person. And I think that's important. So I've said to you there just now, there's potentially maybe 10 young people in SIMD 2. So as a head teacher, it'd be good to identify who those 10 young people are, understand what their stories are, and then you're then able to discuss that attainment journey and the pathway best suited to that young person and support required. So it's a good point.
This is maybe a question for Fiona. I know, Fiona, that we're well ahead of the game as far as electronically is concerned, and we've done really well. Are there any or many pupils who have difficulty in using their devices at home? Because obviously it's not actually a straight education question, but it is important.
Yeah, and the digital team have been linking in with head teachers to make sure around any issues for connectivity, if they need MiFi devices, if they haven't got access to a device at home. So I think more so now than ever. I think even just last week we put an email out again to all our head teachers just as a reminder to say if there were any individual families who needed support with that, then they just had to get in touch. I think I don't know the details of the numbers off the top of my head of each of the schools, but certainly if there are any issues, the head teachers are well aware that they can contact us, Robert Quigley, Tanya Mackey, and then we'll support with any issues around connectivity as well at home. But as you say, because Can You See was the pilot for the Chromebooks and G Suite so many years ago, they're well on the way. But it has been interesting to hear, not just from head teachers in Badenoch and Strathspey, but from our drop-in sessions, some of our staff who maybe weren't as confident in using the digital technology or using Google Classroom. One of the positives that's come out of lockdown and the COVID situation is the fact that they've had to start to engage with that more than they maybe would have done, and staff are reporting that they're feeling much more confident in working and supporting learning and teaching that way. So there are some positives in the situation we're in, but yeah, it's certainly an issue for some families.
And it's even with we've had a number of parents evenings with the localised lockdowns just to reassure parents, as you know. And again, one of the things that we've done is we've actually upskilled parents, because I think that was one of part of your question, Councillor Loban, was that some parents are not IT au fait, and therefore we've offered that service to parents to allow them to be upskilled and to support their young person when they're at home self-isolating. Again, I think that's something we need to move on. And just to say that the head teacher at King UC, Ian Adamson, was the first person that I contacted when we'd gone into lockdown, because some of the practice that they were displaying, from kind of having Google Hangouts with the staff, as coffee mornings, the way that they conducted staff meetings and the way that they were able to access the young people in terms of the continuation of learning was first class. Well, we say that would be, a school that I'd be highlighting as very good practice. And I know that some of Education Scotland have been in touch with them to talk about how lockdown was for them and how they use Google to move that on. So a real positive for the community.
I think also, one of my additional concerns is the fact that given the potential for mass unemployment in the country, some parents may not be able to afford the connectivity that kids require, even though they've got a council provided device. They may not have the financial ability to give them that connectivity, and I was just wondering if there was any way that we're checking to make sure that that's not the case.
And sorry, Fiona, for talking over you, but we have an officer, Beth Brown, who's responsible for pupil equity funding and Scottish Attainment Challenge money. So they were able to identify those young people who, as you've said there, just now, Councillor Loban, might not have access to it, and we gave free devices, which gave we paid for the access for Wi-Fi, which again was, I think we spoke about it during COVID, but it's obviously got lost in all the various things that happened, but a real positive.
Yeah, and that's the email I was referring to that we put out to head teachers last week about the MiFi, the dongle devices. There's no charge for there's no cost to the families to use those, and it gives them the internet access.
Well, that's good. That's really brilliant. Thank you.
Can I just come back? Sorry, Councillor Loban. Can I just quickly come back to a point Councillor Coburn made about transition and the head teachers being in post? Sorry, it was just to say as well that your point about the pupils moving between the primary and the secondary in terms of their needs. I think one of the things that we will continue to link in, but maybe you've raised that point, maybe more so now, is around transition and around what they're doing in their ASGs and what other head teachers and other ASGs are doing in terms of supporting them for their transition. Because I think it's really, really crucial that is, we have an effective transition plan in place between primary and secondary. But the fact that we've now got those permanent head teachers in post in the area as well will really help to cement that, because it has been a difficult time with people in acting positions and maybe things changing. But we have got all of our head teachers in a permanent position now in both ASGs. That'll be a real positive, I think. So we'll continue to work with them on that too.
Nikki?
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor. I know that Councillor Hardley and Councillor Coburn will be pleased around this too. So one of the key things from coming out of the SQA results, and we obviously going out and speaking to the young people, is that we're going to be offering the Mental Health and Wellbeing Award for all of our third year young people, and that's something that I'd like to commit to at the Education Committee next week. So Education will pay for that award, which then ensures that our young people can be peer support for the mental health issues that are coming out of our schools. Again, that was just based on some of the conversations that I've had, as I've been out on my kind of eco tours in Caithness and Sutherland, that young people have identified that they're more likely to talk to their peers about, how they're feeling. So we'll make that commitment next week that, all schools will undertake the Mental Health and Wellbeing Award in S3, which I think is a real positive, and no other local authority have done that. And again, it's just based on, as well as some of the conversations that I've had with some of the members. So.
And I know that's going to be a focus of discussion for the children's plan as part of the community planning partnerships as well, around how we can support the mental health and well-being of our young people.
Pippa?
I just wanted to come in on the back of that and say I'm absolutely delighted. If there's one thing that really stands out for me in this current climate, is that our young people have a really good grasp of mental health, what it looks like, the dangers to not having it. They have absolutely no compunction about speaking out. Everything that we've been putting out as adults into our communities and our society, saying, don't be afraid to talk, speak to people, acknowledge what things are, name them. Our kids have picked that up and they're running with it. And I'm never been prouder to see them all with such an awareness of how happiness means health. And I think it's marvellous that the council's really going to hammer that home with that. That's just wonderful news. Thank you so much.
ladies, I think we've had a fair go at this, and really, again, on behalf of the members, I'll just express my thanks for today's report. It's been really well delivered and it's much appreciated. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Guys, we now move to the final item today, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anyone have any comments regarding the minutes of the previous meeting? You're asked to note them. They've already been looked at by the council, so thank you all. Thank you for attending, and thank to all members of staff who are here and looked after as well today. So enjoy the rest of your day.